Every morning, before the world even opens its eyes, a decision is made. It's not spoken aloud. No one hears it. No one sees it. But it defines everything. The man who rises with discipline does not wait for the alarm to tell him what to do. He doesn't negotiate with his excuses. He doesn't ask permission from comfort. The decision is made before his feet touch the floor, a silent vow to take control, to lead, to shape the day before the day can shape him. Because every morning you are standing at the crossroads of your own life, and the world is waiting to pull you. It will offer distractions disguised as urgency, fear wrapped as logic, comfort pretending to be rest. And most will fall for it. Most will hit snooze not just on their alarms, but on their dreams. They will reach for their phones, not for purpose. They will scroll, not strive. They will allow the first voice they hear to come from outside themselves, and in that moment, they surrender. They let the world write their story before they've written the first word. But you were not made for that. There is a version of you, fierce, clear, focused, who doesn't stumble into life but commands it. A version who doesn't hope for the day to go well but dictates it with certainty. And it begins right here, in the first hour, when silence still lingers and the noise hasn't yet found you. You don't need more time. You need more clarity in the time you already have. You don't need more motivation. You need a non-negotiable mindset. And that begins not with action, but with thought. Because every act of greatness begins in the unseen, in the mind that has chosen. Before the world claims you, you must claim yourself. You awaken the mind before the body, because if the mind is scattered, no amount of effort can save the day. But if the mind is sharp, even in chaos, you stand like steel in a storm. In those first few sacred minutes, the mind is untouched, soft clay, waiting to be molded. Most men fill it with anxiety, with yesterday's regrets and tomorrow's fears. But you shape it with intent. You command it with precision. You fill it not with noise, but with clarity. Not with doubt, but direction. You sit in stillness, not as a luxury, but as a weapon. Because stillness is where kings are forged. In that silence you face yourself. You meet your ambition, your discipline, your reflection. You don't run from discomfort. You sit with it. You tame it. You transform it. You rehearse the day in your mind, not by chance but by choice. You see yourself moving through each obstacle with power. You see the interruptions, and you see yourself unshaken. You visualize the pressure, and you remain calm. You don't wonder what the day will bring. You tell it. You see yourself completing the work. You hear yourself delivering the words. You feel the rhythm of victory before a single moment has passed. This is not imagination. It is preparation, because the body follows the mind, and a mind that has already won commands a body that cannot lose. There is no magic in success. There is only intention repeated until it becomes identity. And if you cannot win your own mind in the morning, how will you win anything else? So you begin by deciding, what energy will I bring? Because the world doesn't give you energy. You bring it. You walk into the day with certainty, not because it's easy, but because you trained yourself in the silence before the noise. You do not wait to feel powerful. You speak power into the air. You rise and you speak, not to the world, but to yourself. Because the most important voice you will ever hear is your own. Most men don't even realize they've handed over their lives to weak language. I can't, I'm tired, I'm not sure. And without knowing it, they build a cage with their words, but not you. You speak with force. You speak with fire. You speak not what you feel, but what you decide. I am focused. I am disciplined. I am unshaken. You don't wait for the world to validate you. You validate yourself in the mirror before the world can respond, because the world reflects back what you first declare. And when your voice roars with certainty, your mind follows, your body aligns, and your life begins to obey. You choose gratitude not because life is perfect, but because it's fuel. You realize that power and peace cannot coexist with complaint. You start with what is right, your breath, your strength, your chance to fight again, and from there you rise. You realize that fear cannot survive in a mind filled with gratitude. That strength begins with what you already own. That no matter the chaos outside, you command the tone from within. This is how a warrior prepares. Not with swords, with stillness. Not with shouting, with silence. Not with reaction, with command. Because most of the world is reactive. They let the first insult ruin the whole day. Let a delay shatter their focus. Let a challenge destroy their rhythm. But the man who masters his morning, he doesn't flinch. He's already seen it. He's already beaten it. Because he doesn't hope to lead. He trains to lead. He doesn't wish for clarity. He builds it in the dawn. He rises before the world begins, not because it's easy, but because it's necessary. While others are tangled in dreams, he's wide awake living his purpose. While others seek comfort, he confronts the voice of weakness and denies it access. That's the real battle. Not with the world, but with the inner pull of mediocrity. The temptation to wait, to delay, to be average. The strongest chains aren't on the outside, they're the quiet, invisible ones we accept inside. The man who wins his morning breaks those chains before the world even speaks his name. He sets the rules before anyone else tries to write them. He moves from intention, not impulse. From clarity, not confusion. He sets his rhythm in silence, so when the noise arrives, it cannot disrupt him. The world begins to pull, but he is already too grounded, too steady, too deep in his mission to be moved. Because he doesn't begin with what needs to be done. He begins with why. He reminds himself, not once, not occasionally, but daily, of his definite chief aim. He doesn't drift through the day wondering what matters. He writes it down, he commits it to paper, and in doing so, he commits to himself. This ritual is not poetic. It's powerful. It's not about motivation. It's about anchoring. Because when you're anchored to purpose, the winds of distraction cannot move you. That simple act, hand to paper, separates the builder from the dreamer. He writes his mission. He reads it aloud. He owns it. This is what I stand for. This is what I'm building. This is why I rise. And the fog that clouds lesser men disappears in that moment. His decisions become binary, aligned or not aligned. There is no maybe, no drift, no gray zone. If it serves the mission, it stays. If it weakens the mission, it's gone. Clarity is freedom, and he lives free because his direction is decided. The man who does not know his purpose is a slave to every opinion, every trend, every interruption. But the man who defines his aim every morning is unstoppable. His energy is precise. His time is sacred. His presence is undeniable. People feel it. Doors open for him not by luck, but because certainty is magnetic. And he carries that certainty like armor. When the world doubts him, he remembers the vow he made in silence. When fatigue creeps in, he remembers the words he wrote before the sun rose. When temptation whispers, he doesn't listen. He's already heard the voice of truth earlier that morning, and it speaks louder. He doesn't just plan. He visualizes not the fantasy, the fight. He rehearses pressure. He rehearses resistance. He rehearses how he will show up when everything is against him. And because he's seen it all before, nothing surprises him. This is the victory visualization technique. The battlefield is the mind, and he fights the battle there before he ever enters the world. He closes his eyes and sees himself speak with authority. He sees himself handle rejection with poise. He sees himself keep going long after comfort has left the room. He sees it all, not as wishful thinking but as mental training. And the mind, unable to tell the difference between the vividly imagined and the physically experienced, responds. It primes the body. It conditions the nerves. It sets the emotional tone for everything that follows. That's why he walks with calm. Because the day is no longer unknown. It's already been conquered in his mind. Lesser men panic when difficulty strikes. But he has already overcome it before it arrived. And now that it's here, it's nothing but déjà vu. He doesn't react, he responds, because he has trained himself to practice the law of non-reaction. He does not flinch when things go sideways. He does not raise his voice when chaos erupts. He does not tremble at insult or melt under pressure. His baseline is calm. His heart rate doesn't spike with drama. His thoughts don't scatter with unexpected events. While others spiral, he holds the center. Not because he's suppressing emotion, but because he's mastered it. This is not suppression. This is sovereignty. The man who reacts is owned by everything. The man who does not react owns himself. You can measure a man's strength not by how loud he shouts, but by how still he remains when the storm arrives. And that stillness, it was forged in the early morning. In silence, in intention, in repetition. He trained himself not to respond to emotion but to command it. So when the insult comes, he doesn't retaliate. He sees the weakness of the one who threw it. When disappointment knocks, he doesn't collapse, he reads it as feedback. When the world tries to provoke, he doesn't give his peace away like it's worthless. He knows that his energy is a kingdom. And not everyone deserves access. He protects it because it powers everything. That's why he guards the gate of his mind. Most men wake up and immediately hand over the keys to their castle. They let fear in, let doubt in, let the noise of others define the narrative of their life. But he is the gatekeeper. He decides what enters. He decides what stays. And anything that weakens his spirit, anything that disrupts his clarity, anything that plants hesitation, is rejected. No debate, no delay. He does not start his day with uncertainty. He starts with dominance over his thoughts, over his emotions, over the state he chooses to live in. Because he knows the first few thoughts of the morning write the software of the day. So he doesn't let accident choose. He chooses. With force, with fire, with full conviction. And in doing so, he walks into the world not hoping to stay focused, but knowing that he is already built for it. He's not looking for perfect conditions, he creates them. And if they don't exist, he executes anyway, because his discipline is not tied to comfort. His momentum is not tied to motivation. His action is not dependent on mood. It's written in the contract he signs every single morning. A contract no one sees, no one demands, no one enforces, except him. While the world waits for reminders, he holds himself accountable. He doesn't wait for pressure. He creates pressure. He doesn't wait for the bar to be raised. He raises it himself. He writes it out. Today, I will speak with power. I will finish my work with excellence. I will not entertain distraction. I will act with integrity when no one is watching. And when the day pushes, he remembers. Because ink on paper becomes a mirror he can't ignore, a reflection of who he said he would be. This is not routine. It's reinforcement. It's an oath. The man who writes his standards lives above average. Not because the world demands it, but because he does. And when temptation comes whispering to cut corners, to give in, to be less than he is, that contract becomes louder than the noise. Because when you write your expectations, you remind the deepest part of yourself who's in command. And then you fuel the machine. You don't feed your body out of habit. You feed it out of honor. You don't treat breakfast like a break from discipline. You treat it like the launch pad of dominance. Because the body is not just flesh. It's the amplifier of the mind. And if the mind is ready, but the body is sluggish, you've handed your edge away. He eats with intention. No garbage, no sugar-coated betrayal, no comfort disguised as nutrition. He selects his fuel like a warrior chooses his weapons, deliberately, efficiently, consciously, because he knows clarity comes not just from thought, but from chemistry. He doesn't eat to feel full. He eats to feel focused. He doesn't drink water when he's thirsty. He drinks water because he's a living engine, and engines don't wait to run dry before they're fueled. His energy doesn't come from caffeine highs or sugar spikes. It comes from alignment, from giving his system what it actually needs, not what impulse craves. Because mastery isn't just about mindset. It's about the chain reaction from thought to emotion to body to execution. He honors every link in the chain. While others eat whatever's easiest, he eats what sharpens him. And in that meal, that moment, he reinforces the truth that discipline is not an act. It's an identity. You don't get strong by reacting to hunger. You get strong by mastering it. The same man who says no to junk food says no to junk thoughts. The same man who drinks water instead of soda speaks truth instead of excuses. The lines are not separate. They are the same. The man who feeds his body with intention moves through life with precision. And it doesn't stop with food, because what enters the mind is just as sacred. Mental nutrition, that first content you consume, it writes the day's rhythm. So he doesn't wake up and scroll. He doesn't grab the phone before he grabs his focus. He doesn't let the news define his state before he defines it himself. He opens books, not browsers. He listens to wisdom, not whispers. He fills his first minutes not with noise, but with power. Whether it's a passage from a timeless voice, a verse of truth, or a line he's written himself, he feeds his mind as if it were his soul, because it is. He does not eat garbage for breakfast. So why would he think garbage first thing in the morning? He selects what enters. He filters what stays, and if there's silence, it's not emptiness. It's calibration. Real silence is not the absence of sound, it's the absence of chaos. It's the tuning of a man to his highest frequency. That's why, while the rest of the world is rushing, tapping, panicking, he's still sharp, calm, clear. Because the foundation was already set. The day was already built. Now all that's left is to walk through it with purpose. He's not navigating blindly. He's following a blueprint. A master plan, not written once and forgotten, but reviewed, refined, and recommitted to every morning. The mountain he's climbing isn't abstract. It has a name, a shape, a direction. He doesn't just know what he's doing today. He knows where today fits in the life he's building. The undisciplined live for the next hour. The master lives for the next decade, and that's why he's relentless. Because when you tie today's effort to tomorrow's empire, there is no "I'll do it later." There is only "let's build." He checks the master plan, not for inspiration, but for alignment. If a task fits the mission, it gets full energy. If it doesn't, it dies without debate. The man who knows where he's going never gets lost in distraction. He doesn't say yes to everything because he doesn't need to. He's not busy. He's intentional. He's not overwhelmed. He's prepared. Because while others run in circles, he walks a straight line, carved in the quiet, reviewed in the dark, executed in the light. He's not working just to get things done. He's working to become something. Every task is a brick. Every word, every decision, every sacrifice, it all builds towards something bigger than the moment. That's why he shows up with fire, even on days when the fire tries to hide. Because he's not fueled by feelings. He's fueled by the future. He doesn't get dragged into chaos. He doesn't wander into the day like a man with nothing to lose. He enters with the weight of purpose, and that weight makes him solid, unmovable, unbreakable. He knows that discomfort isn't a problem. It's proof. Proof that he's stretching, evolving, refining. Pain isn't punishment. It's polish. It's the friction that sharpens the blade. So he doesn't resist it. He respects it. Because comfort is not the goal. Growth is. And growth never comes wrapped in ease. It comes dressed as resistance, fatigue, and repetition. But repetition, that's where kings are made. While the world glorifies the new, he honors the consistent. He doesn't chase variety. He builds mastery. He doesn't look for entertainment. He trains endurance. Because he knows greatness isn't found in the rare, it's forged in the repeated, over and over. Again and again, not until it's convenient, but until it's natural, until it's who he is. And if the world calls it boring, let it. The world doesn't understand mastery. The world doesn't see what happens behind the curtain. The world only sees the result, never the ritual, but he sees it all. He feels it all. He knows that what the world calls discipline, he calls freedom. Because discipline doesn't trap him, it releases him. From confusion, from weakness, from regret. He is not at the mercy of mood swings or whim. He doesn't need to wait for ideal conditions or perfect timing. The conditions are perfect because he shows up ready. Every morning, the victory is decided before the first move is made. Not with noise, but with order. Not with hope, but with command. He doesn't just survive the day, he shapes it. He walks in knowing that no one can steal what he has already claimed within. No critic, no challenge, no disruption can reach the place that was fortified before sunrise. His clarity is too strong, his focus too sharp, his intention too deeply rooted. He's not building momentum from the outside in, he's driving it from the inside out. Because the world doesn't get to choose how he feels. He does. He doesn't hand over his emotional state to traffic, to gossip, to unexpected news. That power doesn't belong to anyone else. It belongs to the man who claimed it first thing in the morning. And because he did, he moves through noise like wind through steel, unaffected, untouchable. But not disconnected. He's not numb. He's disciplined. He's not distant. He's deeply present, more present than those who are tossed around by every emotional tide, more alive than those who feel everything, yet choose nothing. Because the man who commands his focus commands his life. He doesn't scroll his way through the day. He sculpts it. He doesn't drown in comparison. He's too busy becoming. He doesn't ask, "What do they think of me?" He asks, "What do I demand from myself?" That's the question that echoes in his head long before anyone else speaks. That's the question that cuts through the noise. That's the question that keeps his feet planted when doubt tries to blow him over. What do I demand from myself? Not what the world demands, not what circumstances suggest, but what I demand. Because the highest standard isn't set by pressure, it's set by purpose. And his purpose isn't casual. It's chosen. It's sacred. He doesn't revisit it once a year when things fall apart. He revisits it every morning before anything falls into place. He doesn't need a breakdown to wake up. He wakes up by design. He doesn't wait for failure to force change. He builds change into his daily rhythm. Because he understands something the average man forgets. That life doesn't respond to hopes. It responds to habits. It responds to what you do, not once, but repeatedly. And so he trains his instincts. He doesn't leave them wild. He shapes them, conditions them, directs them like arrows toward the target. And the target is always forward. Forward in thought. Forward in action. Forward in being. No matter the challenge, no matter how uncertain the tide. Because when the mind is fortified and the body is fueled, when the purpose is written and the spirit is anchored, there's nothing that can stop a man from moving forward. Not failure, not fear, not fatigue. Because he's not fueled by conditions. Conviction doesn't come from what you say once. It comes from what you do daily. He knows this. That's why every morning his habits aren't routine. They are ritual. Sacred repetitions that realign him with his higher self. The self that doesn't chase, it builds. The self that doesn't wish, it works. The self that doesn't collapse, it recalibrates. That's who he trains to become. Over and over again, because greatness is not inherited, it is forged. And forging is never comfortable, so he makes peace with the grind. He honors it, because inside it he found who he truly is. Not in the applause, not in the arrival, but in the early morning when no one is watching. That's where he met the version of himself who does not quit. The version that is not seduced by comfort or trapped by failure. The version that knows the man I'm becoming is more important than the pain I'm avoiding. That is his compass. And that compass makes his path unshakable, even when storms come. And they do. He doesn't ask if he's strong enough. He remembers that strength was already built when no one else saw it. It wasn't built in the moment of testing. It was built long before, in the silence, in the grind, in the first hour of the day. He doesn't let the external dictate the internal. The world might be noisy, unstable, but he is steady. Because he doesn't live by the world's energy, he lives by his own. That energy is chosen, deliberately, daily. He speaks it into the air before the day can speak to him. Not softly, not timidly, but with the force of someone who understands that the tongue builds reality. He speaks who he is. I am relentless. I am focused. I am disciplined. I do not wait. I do not fold. Not affirmations. Declarations, not requests, commands, and his mind listens. It believes not because it wants to, but because it has heard these words so often, so consistently, with such certainty, that doubt no longer has room to breathe. Every sentence becomes a strike against weakness. Every phrase, a sword carving away what no longer belongs. Every word, a brick reinforcing identity. That's why he speaks, not to impress others, to instruct himself, to remind his body who is in charge, to remind his emotions who gets the final say, to remind his fears they are no longer welcome. Because every time he speaks power, he lives power. And there's no gap between what he says and what he does, because the voice inside leads the action outside. So his walk matches his words, his execution reflects his energy. People notice, not because he's loud, but because he's aligned. Because when a man declares who he is, and then moves like it's already true, the world bends. Not immediately, but inevitably. That's the power of alignment. That's the force of identity rooted in decision, not drift. And that's why he does this every morning. Not when it's easy, not when it's urgent, but always. Because the man who waits for life to make him urgent will live small. But the man who chooses urgency before the world demands it, that man builds empires. He doesn't wait for clarity. He creates it through action. He doesn't wait for opportunity. He sharpens himself so he can spot it and seize it. He doesn't wait to be chosen. He chooses himself every morning and acts like it's final, because it is. He made the choice when the rest of the world was still asleep. He decided before anyone could distract him. He took the reins before the day could scatter him. And because of that, he's ahead, not in competition but in composure. The world will test him, but it will not define him, because he's already defined himself. And when the day tries to derail him with setbacks, interruptions with all its noise and nonsense, he doesn't fall behind. He adjusts and continues. Because his foundation is solid, his morning built it, his rituals protect it, His discipline proves it. He doesn't chase success. He embodies it. Every step, every response, every decision echoes back to the sacred time when he was alone with his thoughts, his goals, his reflection. And there, in that space the world overlooks, he became unshakable. Not because he never falls, but because he rises the same way he begins, with purpose, with fire, with no one's permission but his own. With no one's permission but his own. Because once you've built yourself in silence, once you've stood alone in the dark and chosen to rise anyway, there's nothing they can take from you. They can't take your peace because it wasn't given by the world. They can't shake your confidence because it wasn't borrowed, it was built. They can't break your rhythm because it runs deeper than the noise ever could reach. This is what the undisciplined will never understand. That the true power isn't found in loud victories or shining moments. It's in what no one sees. It's in what you do when no one's clapping, when no one's cheering, when no one's watching, when the world is still asleep and you're already awake, writing, planning, lifting, praying, reflecting, building. That's where the real transformation lives. In the silence before the storm, in the stillness before the noise. And the man who owns those moments, he owns everything that comes after. He's not rushing out the door trying to catch up to life. He's already ahead because his soul was anchored before the first distraction knocked. And when others feel overwhelmed, he breathes deeper. Not because he's immune to pressure, but because he trained for this. Every morning is preparation. Every morning is armor. He walks out the door already forged in fire. So when the chaos comes, and it always comes, he doesn't ask why me. He says, I'm ready. Not in arrogance, but in certainty. He knows he's been tested before the world even had a chance to test him. He's passed trials in his mind. He's rehearsed discomfort, rejection, challenge, and in doing so, stripped them of their surprise. That's the advantage of the man who masters the morning. He enters life already composed. Where others stumble into decisions, he acts with precision. Where others react, he responds. Where others retreat, he recalibrates. Not because life is easy, but because he chose not to be ruled by it. His compass doesn't spin with the wind. It's locked onto the vision he reviewed before the sun even rose. That's why setbacks don't define him. He doesn't see them as punishments. He sees them as feedback, as direction, as sharpening. A stumble today, just part of the climb. A failure this morning, just data for better execution. Because his life isn't a series of disconnected days, it's a mission. And every morning he wakes up and aligns himself with that mission. No matter how he feels, no matter what happened yesterday, no matter how uncertain tomorrow looks. This is what separates the uncommon from the average. Most people live in response. They wake up and check the world before they check themselves. They check their messages before they check their purpose. They chase calm in a storm they chose by default. But not him. He wakes and claims the throne. He sits in stillness and reclaims his crown, because the mind is a kingdom. And if you do not rule it, something else will. And once something else does, you are no longer the creator of your life. You're just a product of whatever energy gets there first. That's why he begins before the world begins. Not just early, but strategically, spiritually, sovereignly. Those hours before dawn, they belong to him. While others drift in and out of dreams, he is living his by design, by ritual, by relentless decision. And it's in those early hours where the greatest things are born. Not because of what he does, but because of who he becomes in the process. Because consistency does something no motivation ever can. It changes your identity. And when you change your identity, you don't have to try to be disciplined. You are disciplined. You don't have to fight to focus. You are focused. You don't have to force momentum. You live in motion. This is what the world feels when he walks in the room. Alignment, strength, ownership, not from a life of perfection, but from a morning built in silence, stacked in repetition, and lived in integrity. From a morning built in silence, stacked in repetition, and lived in integrity. Because when the fifth hour belongs to Him, the rest of the day falls in line, not by accident, not by luck, but by law, the law of cause and effect. He is the cause. His clarity is the cause. His decisions, His rituals, His inner command, all of it becomes the seed from which every external effect grows. He no longer fights to control the world. He doesn't have to. He controls Himself, and that control ripples outward into every interaction, every challenge, every room He walks into. Where others bend to chaos, He remains straight. Where others shift their standards based on emotion, He builds His reality on principle. That's the difference. Because control of the morning is not a productivity hack. It's not a motivational trend. It's not about getting more done. It's about becoming more. Becoming the man who doesn't need external validation to move. Becoming the man who doesn't need the world to slow down to find peace. Becoming the man who doesn't surrender his will at the first sign of difficulty, but instead becomes the one who commands difficulty to serve his mission. That mission? It lives in his chest before it lives in the world, and he checks in with it daily, not when life breaks, but to prevent the break. Not when he's lost, but to ensure he never drifts. And because of that, he's never truly off track, only in training. Every moment, even the hard ones, serve a purpose. And every day begins with the reminder, I'm not here to react to life, I'm here to create it. That's the root of true energy. Not caffeine, not sleep, but sovereignty, the fire that comes from knowing, not wondering who you are and what you stand for. The clarity that comes from living on your own terms, on your own frequency, in alignment with your own truth. That's why he doesn't chase the world's rhythm. He sets his own. And the world eventually adjusts. Because reality respects the man who respects himself first. The man who showed up before the applause. The man who did the work before the reward. The man who kept the promise he made in silence, without excuse, without witness. That man, the one forged in the early hour, in the quiet vow, in the repeated ritual, that man does not fear the day, because he already owns it. And the man who owns his morning, he doesn't just win the day, he commands his life. There are no secrets. There is no shortcut. There is only this moment, when you open your eyes and decide. Will you let the day shape you, or will you shape it? Will you follow the noise, or will you rise in silence? Will you wait for life to hand you control, or will you take it? Because right now, at this hour, in this breath, the throne is empty, and it belongs to the man who is ready to rule. So rise, stand up, command the mind, sharpen the spirit, fuel the body, choose your energy, protect your thoughts, speak your identity, live your mission, and move into the world like the man you were born to be. Relentless, focused, unstoppable, because when you master the morning, you master everything. And the man who commands the first hour writes the rest. Not with ink, not with talk, but with fire. And the world will feel it, not because you told them, but because you showed them. In every step, in every breath, in every moment, the morning is the throne, the mind is the kingdom, and the man who rules both rules everything.